Part 1. She was building a shelter with broken boards. The plain stretched wide under a fading afternoon sun, the wind sweeping through tall grass like a warning whispered across the land. From the ridge overlooking the valley, Caleb Mercer reined in his horse and stared down toward the creek. Something wasn't right. No one lived there anymore, not since the floods. Not since the land had been declared useless for farming and forgotten by the town. Yet there she was, small against the open earth, dragging broken boards through the dirt. A woman. Caleb narrowed his eyes, watching as she tried to stand two warped planks upright. Her hands trembled, not just from effort, but from exhaustion. When the boards collapsed again, she didn't scream or curse. She simply stood still, shoulders slumped, as if bracing herself for another disappointment life had already promised. Caleb exhaled slowly. "Shouldn't be here," he muttered. He'd learned long ago that trouble often wore the face of desperation. Still, he didn't right away. The woman by the creek. Her name was Eliza Hale, though at that moment she felt like no one at all. She hadn't planned to stop at the creek. Her feet simply gave out. 2 days of walking with little water and no proper food had stripped her down to survival alone. When she spotted the remains of an old shed half sunk into the ground, it felt like a sign. Broken boards could still be walls. Rusty tin could still be a roof, if she worked fast enough. She wiped sweat from her brow and lifted another plank, ignoring the sharp sting in her palms. The wood splintered under pressure, snapping cleanly in half. That was it. Eliza sank to her knees in the dirt. She pressed her forehead to the ground, tears slipping free before she could stop them. Not loud sobs, just quiet ones, the kind that came after hope had already been beaten down too many times. "I just need one night," she whispered to no one. Just one. A rancher who had lost enough. Caleb watched her through the lengthening shadows. He told himself to leave. He had fences to check, cattle to count, a ranch that demanded his attention. Helping strangers had cost him before, cost him money, trust, and once, someone he loved. Yet his horse didn't move. He remembered another winter, another fragile figure, another moment when he'd looked away. His jaw tightened. "No," he said quietly, "not again." He turned his horse and rode back toward his ranch, dust rising behind him as the sun dipped low. The decision. An hour later, Caleb stood in his lumber shed, running a hand along fresh-cut boards stacked neatly against the wall. His foreman, Hank, leaned against the doorway. "You look like a man arguing with himself." Caleb didn't look up. "Ever see something you know you shouldn't get involved in?" Hank snorted. "Every day. Question is, did you?" Caleb loaded the boards into his wagon. "Yeah," he said. "I did." Hank watched quietly, then nodded. "Then do it right." First contact. By the time Caleb reached the creek again, the sky was burning orange and gold. Eliza stiffened the moment she heard the wagon. Fear shot through her. She scrambled to her feet, gripping her dull axe like it was the only thing keeping her alive. "Stop right there," she shouted, voice shaking. Caleb halted the wagon and raised his hands. "I'm not here to hurt you." She eyed the lumber suspiciously. "Then why are you here?" He gestured behind him. "Because broken boards don't stand long." Silence hung between them. "I can't pay. I don't have money or anything worth—" "I didn't come for payment." Her grip on the axe loosened just a little. Building trust one board at a time. Caleb worked without asking permission. He measured, cut, and braced the frame while Eliza watched from a distance, unsure whether to stop him or thank him. Slowly, she stepped closer. "That corner won't hold," she said softly. Caleb paused. "You know construction?" "My father, before he died." He adjusted the beam. "Like this?" She nodded. "Yes, that'll last." For the first time, her voice carried something other than fear. They worked until dusk, the shelter taking shape with every nail driven. Stronger, safer. When Caleb handed her a lantern, their fingers brushed. She flinched, not from him, but from the memory of being alone too long. "I didn't ask your name," he said. "Eliza." "Caleb." She looked at him then, really looked, not as a threat, not as a rescuer, just a man who chose not to walk away. A line not yet crossed. When the shelter finally stood, Eliza stepped inside slowly, touching the smooth wood as if it might vanish. "This will hold," Caleb said, "at least for now." She swallowed hard. "Thank you." He nodded once. "Get some rest." As he climbed back into the wagon, she spoke again. "Why did you help me?" Caleb paused. "Because someone should have helped you sooner." He rode away before she could reply. Eliza stood alone beneath the darkening sky, lantern glowing softly inside the shelter that hadn't existed that morning. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid of the night. And from the ridge above, Caleb looked back once, just once, knowing something had already changed, even if neither of them understood how much. The wind rolled across the open plains like a restless ocean, bending the tall grass under a pale afternoon sun. From the ridge above the valley, Caleb Mercer sat still on his horse, reins loose in his weathered hands, eyes fixed on a small figure near the creek below. She was struggling. Even from a distance, Caleb could see it. A woman, thin, exhausted, her brown hair tied back with a strip of cloth, was trying to build some kind of shelter from broken boards and scraps of rusted tin. Each time the wind kicked up, her half-standing walls shuddered and threatened to collapse. Caleb frowned. Nobody lived out there, not anymore. That land had been abandoned years ago after a flash flood tore through the old homesteads. Folks said it was cursed, unlucky. Caleb didn't believe in curses, but he did believe in hunger, cold, and desperation. And that woman had all three written into her movements. She lifted a cracked plank, tried to brace it against another, and winced as it slipped from her fingers and fell. She didn't curse. She just closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength from somewhere deep inside. Caleb had seen that look before. He nudged his horse forward, then stopped himself. "Damn it," he muttered. He was a rancher, not a savior. Life had taught him that getting involved usually led to trouble. Still, he stayed. A woman with nothing left. Her name was Eliza Hale, though Caleb wouldn't learn that until much later. She had arrived at the creek 2 days earlier with nothing but a worn satchel, a dull axe, and a promise she'd made to herself: survive. Eliza had lost her husband the previous winter to pneumonia, lost their small rented home soon after. Town charity ran dry fast, especially for a woman with no family and no trade anyone cared to pay for. So she left. She walked until her boots tore and her feet blistered, until she found the creek and the remains of a fallen shed half swallowed by weeds. Broken boards were better than nothing. Tin scraps could keep out rain. At least she hoped so. But hope didn't stop the wind. As she tried again to prop up the wall, the plank snapped clean in half. That was when she finally sat down on the dirt and cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears falling into dust. The rancher decided. From the ridge, Caleb shifted in his saddle. "Damn it," he said softly. He turned his horse around and headed back toward his ranch, not away, but not toward her either. An hour later, he was loading fresh-cut lumber into his wagon. His ranch foreman raised an eyebrow. "Building something new, boss?" Caleb hesitated. "Helping someone who didn't ask." The foreman nodded slowly. Those are usually the ones who need it most. Caleb drove the wagon down the dirt road, the sun dipping low behind him. As he approached the creek, Eliza sprang to her feet, fear flashing in her eyes. She grabbed the axe. Caleb stopped the wagon at a distance and raised both hands. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't lower the axe. "Then why are you here?" He gestured to the lumber. "I looked like you could use better boards." Silence hung between them, broken only by the creek's steady flow. Finally, her grip loosened. "I can't pay you." Caleb stepped down from the wagon. "I didn't ask for payment." Building more than walls. They worked until nightfall. Caleb cut and fitted the lumber with practiced ease, showing Eliza how to brace the corners so the walls wouldn't shift. She listened closely, memorizing every move. "You done this before?" she asked. "Built half my ranch with my own hands," he replied. She nodded. "I grew up watching my father build barns. Guess I forgot some things." "Grief does that," Caleb said before he could stop himself. She looked at him, surprised. "Yes," she said quietly, "it does." By the time the stars came out, the shelter stood solid, small but sturdy, a roof that wouldn't leak, walls that wouldn't fall. Eliza stood inside, running her hand along the smooth wood. "I don't know how to thank you." Caleb shrugged. "Just stay warm." He left her with extra nails, a lantern, and more lumber than she needed. As he drove away, he told himself that was the end of it. It wasn't. Days turned into something else. Caleb returned 2 days later, then again the week after, sometimes with supplies, sometimes just to check the structure. Eliza never asked him to come, but she always seemed relieved when he did. She had cleaned the shelter, planted a small garden patch, even fixed up a fire pit. "You're making a home," Caleb said one afternoon. Eliza smiled faintly. "I have to. It's all I've got." Caleb hesitated. "You don't have to stay here. I could help you find work in town." She headed her head. "Town didn't want me. Out here, at least, I answered to myself." He respected that. He admired it. The storm. The storm came hard and fast. Black clouds rolled in just after sunset, thunder cracking like rifle fire. Caleb was halfway through his evening meal when he thought of the creek, of Eliza. He didn't finish eating. By the time he reached the shelter, rain was pounding the ground, the creek swelling dangerously close to its banks. Eliza was outside, trying to secure a loose tarp. "Get inside!" Caleb shouted. A gust tore the tarp from her hands and knocked her to the ground. Caleb jumped from his horse, grabbed her, and pulled her into the shelter just as the rain intensified. The structure held. They sat there in the dim lantern light, soaked and breathing hard. "I was scared," she admitted. "So was I," Caleb said. That was the first time he realized how deeply he cared. What the town said. Word spread. A rancher helping a woman living alone by the creek. People talked. They always did. Some warned him she was trouble. Others claimed she was after his land. He ignored them all. One afternoon, Eliza confronted him. "You don't have to keep coming. I don't want to cause you problems." Caleb met her eyes. "You're not a problem." She swallowed. "I'm afraid to depend on anyone." He nodded slowly. "So am I." The choice. Winter approached again. Caleb knew the shelter wouldn't survive heavy snow, no matter how well it was built. One evening, standing beside the creek, he finally said it. "You could come stay at the ranch, just until spring." Eliza stared at the water. "And after?" "That's up to you." She didn't answer right away. When she finally did, her voice was steady. "I won't be a burden." "You won't be alone," he replied. That night, she packed her satchel. A new beginning. Eliza moved into the small guest house on Caleb's ranch. She worked hard, helping in the kitchen, mending clothes, learning the land. Slowly, laughter returned to her voice. And slowly, something else grew between them. Not rushed, not forced. Built like the shelter had been. Board by board, trust by trust. Months later, when spring bloomed across the plains, Caleb took her back to the creek. The shelter still stood. Eliza smiled. "That place saved me." Caleb took her hand. "So did you." Sometimes a single act of kindness changes everything. A rancher who chose not to look away, a woman who refused to give up, and a shelter built from more than wood, built from compassion, patience, and hope. Subscribe for more emotional Western stories.